Scott's here. All right, James, I think we should probably go ahead and get started. And as people come in, we'll just note in the minutes that they arrived.
Yes, sir.
All right, it is 2:03 p.m. on October 16 of 2023. And I'll call to order this meeting of the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Office Oversight Committee. Let's see, we have myself, Mr. McDermott, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Ortiz, Judge Portillo, Judge Dominguez, Judge Hennington, Judge McKenzie, Judge Hoffman, Megan Lavoie, Michelle Moore, and Scott Ellers from TIDC currently in attendance. We'll try to keep up if more people join as we go. So we do have a quorum. We are ready to proceed. Our short list here, number 3, is discussion with guests from Val Verde County. Mr. McDermott.
Yes, Judge. I'd like to introduce the board and to the counties, especially David Martinez. He is the county attorney for Val Verde County, and I think he is here also on behalf of Judge Owens, who is the county judge. As you may not know, but over the past couple of years, there have been discussions off and on with Val Verde County about whether they might be interested in joining our program. They have had their own struggles with indigent defense and their own history with public defenders' offices and trying to struggle with exactly the issues that we deal with here. They have additional issues because of the size and because of the OLS numbers that are coming through there. They are covered by OLS by Lubbock County Public Defender, and so that's not what they're interested in. I think in the past several years, Mr. Martinez can talk a little bit about their experience. In the past couple of years, they have seen some real struggle in getting lawyers who are going to take court appointments and also appear for court. They've also increased skyrocketing costs from the cost or from the bills that are being submitted by the attorneys. And so I'd just like to introduce Mr. Martinez and have him talk a little bit about the experience and what interests Val Verde might be having right now. And before we go on, I can just note for the record, Judge, that Judge Urias and Judge Evans are both in attendance now. But Mr. Martinez, if you'd like to unmute and talk a little bit about the experience that Val Verde's having and sort of what kind of conversation Val Verde might be interested in having going forward.
Absolutely. First of all, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be able to visit with you this afternoon about some of the experience or some of the things that we're experiencing currently here in Val Verde County. As James or Mr. McDermott indicated, I've had a good working relationship with James, probably dating back for about 18 years now. I first met James when he worked with the Texas Rio Grande Public Defender Aid Program here in Val Verde County about 18 years ago. And at that time, when James and another gentleman, Jose Garza, who happens to be the DA now in Travis County, when they were working our program in the Public Defender Office, we had a really good experience working with that office. After James and Jose left for some reason, it seemed like our experience with the Public Defender program kind of went off the rails. As such, that program didn't last much longer after they left. To be quite honest, it left kind of a bitter taste in the mouths of our commissioner's court and our county judge at the time. Since then, I think we've evolved and are at the point where we're trying to reconsider or consider our options to try to get a better hold of the predictability of our indigent defense costs. I can tell you that our numbers this year are already past, and when I'm talking about our numbers, indigent defense costs or bill or invoices submitted have already surpassed the numbers that we were experiencing pre-pandemic. Obviously, during the pandemic, those numbers kind of came down only because accessibility to the courts was somewhat limited, and it's now kind of getting back to what I would say is closer to normal. And our numbers have jumped significantly. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that, at least in my court. And of course, as a county attorney, I prosecute all of the misdemeanor cases in Val Verde County. I can't, and I'm not here speaking for our DA, who handles our felonies. But I would imagine that her experience and her numbers, being a part of the overall numbers, are her experience probably similar to mine. And that being, we have a pretty small defense bar in Val Verde County, and Mr. Ortiz, who's with us this afternoon, is an esteemed member of that defense bar, and he's an attorney, and his office that my office always enjoys working with, because Mr. Ortiz is quite responsive, very thorough in providing defense to his indigent clients. Unfortunately, that's not our experience with all of the other attorneys who handle cases. Because of the small number of defense lawyers that we have available to assist in indigent defense in Val Verde County, we have quite a few attorneys that come in from out of town, namely from Eagle Pass, about 55 miles south of us, who handle a good number of those cases. What we've started to experience now that now that the courts are all back open and moving full steam ahead, what we've experienced with the Eagle Pass attorneys who come into Val Verde County is that many times, if there are 5 or 6 attorneys on a docket from Eagle Pass, one attorney will show up and answer on the docket for all of the attorneys. And unfortunately, for those cases that that person is announcing for that are not his or her own cases, the majority of the announcements are, "Judge, can we get a reset?" And as such, that can gets kicked down the road, and those cases just are not moving at the speed that we would like them to move. What we've experienced also, and I can share this because when our county court of law judge sometimes will inquire of the defendants if they've had an opportunity to meet with their attorney, sadly, more times than not, the answer is no. And sometimes these people have been reset for 3 or 4 times, and their answer to the judge is, "Judge, I've never met my lawyer." That's something that's hard for us to swallow, and it ties our hands, obviously, when we're trying to move cases, we're trying to be efficient with our time, and we're not getting the same treatment from the other side all the time. I'll share with you an experience that we just had this morning. We were picking a jury on a case that had been set for trial several months ago. The defense lawyer didn't contact us for about the 3-week period leading up to trial. We had made an offer to try to resolve the case some time ago. The lawyer appeared this morning, apparently wanting to enter into a plea, but had not confirmed this with his client. It was a little disheartening when he started to try to negotiate the plea to get a better plea offer and wasn't even aware of the discovery that was contained in some of the videotape discovery, because he'd not picked up discovery. My office has an open file policy, so that discovery has been available to him for well over a year now. I convinced him that he probably ought to have a discussion with his client, and they maybe at least ought to watch some of the videos together before we pick the jury. 30 minutes after we sent him out, he came back in with a signed plea packet. And obviously that impacts us in several ways as a county. We had a panel of 80 people show up that we paid, that sat there for a few hours while he conducted his initial discovery, and his client finally came to what we thought was a reasonable decision in getting the case concluded. In addition to that, obviously, because he prepared for trial, now the voucher that he's going to submit is going to include some of that trial prep time. This is a case that probably should have played out 6 months ago. But again, those are some of the inefficiencies that we're experiencing. Again, I share this because now we've started to have some conversations with James. I've maintained good contact with James over the years. Although he's located in Alpine, we still have discussions and we still kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And I always had the hope that maybe one day the county would be able to come back to a more reasonable public defender program compared to the one that we had, 15, 20 years ago. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, James was in town and we had an opportunity to sit down with Judge Owens, who is our county judge. And Judge Owens expressed a very real and a very keen interest in trying to further some of these discussions about a public defender office or a public defender program for Val Verde County. I was grateful to James to have invited me to your meeting here today to allow me to kind of express on behalf of my office and on behalf of the county judge our very real interest and to try to pursue some discussion with James and with your board about the possibility of perhaps the West Texas office expanding down to Val Verde County. Again, I think it helps us probably head off a bigger problem that's probably coming than is already here, and ensuring that the citizens of this community can get some good, sound representation when it comes to indigent defense.
Thank you for that, Mr. Martinez. The things that you're describing are exactly part of the reason that we initially created this office. Is we had the same experience month after month, and of course our obligation as judges to protect the Sixth and Seventh Amendments. It's sacrosanct. We can't, in the interest of efficiency and keeping costs down, ignore the constitutional rights of all of the people who are involuntarily subjected to our processes. And so it was those exact things. And as Scott will probably remember, Scott, were you there when I did the initial pitch and was telling these stories, and the entire room in Austin was shaking their heads in disbelief? I wish you'd been there so you could have said, this is not a one-time thing. It's not a rare thing. This is the norm in a lot of areas that we're trying to overcome by creating these offices. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us. James, let me turn it back over to you.
Yes, I certainly have a soft spot in my heart for Val Verde County. It's where I started my practice. But I believe that, well, I'll say this. I was interested even 4 years ago, before the pandemic started, of looking at expanding, I think for various reasons. One is to increase stability for the program, both for funding and for long-term staffing. Having a larger staff allows us to make longer-term plans and help people want to stay, and for us to absorb problems when somebody leaves. A larger amount of staff means that we're able to do more coverage. We weren't ready 4 years ago. This program was young and it was trying to build, and my commitment in being hired here for these 5 counties was to make the best possible service I could give, or to give the best possible service I could to these 5 counties, and to build a program that was going to be sustainable for them. I think we're at this time where I've done much of that, and to be able to expand and create more efficiencies, I think will help these communities across the Trans-Pecos. I include Val Verde and the Trans-Pecos because the Pecos River goes through Val Verde County. And I think that it can be a real benefit to the 5 counties we exist as the program exists, because much of the administrative costs that we have experienced in this year's budget, and those can be divided among a larger pool, which could hopefully and potentially bring down costs for the existing counties while not changing the services that I'm intending to provide in any way. I believe that Val Verde County is manageable. There is one county between Brewster County and Val Verde, and that is Carroll County. Sanderson is the county seat. The numbers, if Sanderson came along, the numbers in Sanderson would not change in any way what staffing would be required. Of course, there would be hurdles that we would need to talk to with Val Verde County. We could not cover, they are having in-person dockets almost entirely, or in-person consolidating several of their counties. We would not be able to staff that with an office from up here in Alpine. We would need to talk about how staffing would look, what office space would look like down there. What county, if Carroll County wanted to come along. Val Verde County is covered by the 83rd District Court among two of the district courts. That is Judge Cadena, who also is in Fort Stockton and Pecos County. And so, of course, Judge Cadena at some point would need to be involved in conversations. I intended this as an introduction. I would like to move forward in discussions with Val Verde County about what the possibility is, obviously knowing that there's no commitment until anything is signed on paper, including what funding would look like from TIDC, which I've not talked to them about either. This is purely intended to be an introductory presentation to get the mood from the board, and allow the conversation to move forward. And I have forgotten to hit the record button, so I'm going to do that now, Judge, but we've not made any substantive decisions.
All right, Mr. McDermott. Thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions or want to say anything to Mr. Martinez before we let him go about his business, should he choose to do so?
So how many attorneys would we be talking about? It would be maybe there's 2 district courts, correct? So you're talking about maybe a staff of 5 additional people. Is that what y'all are thinking about, James?
Yes, I think, and I had run the numbers before. Now I can't remember, and I don't have them in front of me. I'm sorry, Michelle. But looked to me like there was probably 1 misdemeanor attorney, maybe 3 to 4, depending on what the numbers actually look like, felony lawyers, and that would not be additional work on top of the current staffing or the staffing model that we're trying to hire into. This would be additional on top of that and be borne by whatever agreement would be made by Val Verde County to contribute. But the goal here would obviously not to be to cause an additional financial burden to the existing counties, but to work out a model that can allow Val Verde to be part of our program while also saving money themselves as well.
Yeah, it sounds like a natural progression for growth. So I think it's a great idea.
Mr. McDermott, let me ask you, do you have an example of another department somewhere where they did this kind of expansion? So we might at least have some idea of what the impact would be on the existing counties in the program?
Yes, thank you, Judge. I meant to mention that. I think with many of you, I've talked with you about Tom Green County and the program that started there in the Concho Valley. They weren't open a year. I think they barely started taking cases, and they started having discussions with Taylor County, sort of North Abilene and the counties around them. I believe that Taylor County had initially wanted to have, and Mr. Ehlers or Mr. Colfax can probably jump in and clarify this if I get anything wrong, had initially applied to have their own public defender program. And after they got funding from TIDC and started to figure out how to build that out, realized that they might be able to save costs and do it more efficiently if they joined up with Concho Valley, which I think they were funded at the June board meeting last summer in 2022, and then changed their grant proposal and went back to TIDC, I believe in December of 2022, and got approval to join up with Tom Green County. They do have a separate office in Abilene. So they have one administration run through Tom Green County, 2 separate physical office spaces, an office head in Abilene, but the administration and the ultimate supervision with the chief is now shared between 12 counties instead of between the 7 that I think they started with. So the cost for supporting the administration of the office, the finances, and the chief and the supervision is now being divided among almost doubling the number of counties, which has made sense for Tom Green County and the original counties of Concho Valley. And I think also meant that Taylor County was able to envision the program that they wanted for less cost as well. So it was a win-win as far as I understand.
So the cost for the startup counties went down because the administrative costs were spread out over additional counties with budgets to contribute?
I think so. Is that right, Mr. Ehlers?
Yes.
Okay.
I know we're tight on time. I know I am. I'm going to have to leave pretty soon. So I just, the question that I'm going to have and I'm sorry, I'm confused. Is it Judge Martinez or Mr. Martinez? I heard Mr., but.
No, I'm not risen to that level. I'm just a county attorney.
Oh, okay. I heard the county and I didn't hear regardless. The issue that I will have or that I have is this. First of all, I should start by saying that in spirit, I'm on board. I think those of us who live in West Texas, even the big old metropolis of El Paso, we know that we're neglected. We're used to being neglected and overlooked. And so I think that whenever an opportunity arises for us to work together and support each other is something I really, truly believe in. So I'm all for looking at ways to make this work. But my questions and my hard questions are going to be this is, as we develop a plan and as we engage in discussions, I would really like to get a better understanding of what the problem was with TRLA. I would really, because I think I'm a believer that we learn from those mistakes. We learn from situations that tell us what was wrong about the way that program was set up or how it was or how it played out. So that's the one thing I'd really like to understand as we begin that discussion. And then the second thing is I would really like to see numbers in terms of the size of the docket. And obviously, we just went through a period where we were really, really short-staffed with the public defender's office, and that really set us back. I know, speaking for my court, that set us back because we just were very limited. I mean, we had to do a lot of that. We're not ready, and we have to wait till we get more people. And so we're slowly catching up. The last thing I want to do is bring on more work when we're barely catching up on the work that we already have. So I really would like to see those numbers in terms of what the docket sizes are in all these counties. And I'd like to also see what the numbers are going to mean with regard to hiring staff for our office. So like I said, I'm on board in spirit, but I'd like some answers to those.
Judge, I can certainly give you my perspective since I was there, and also set up a meeting with Mr. Martinez separate if that would be helpful. As far as the second question goes, I think that the Concho Valley model has been somewhat useful in understanding how to add on counties. They did not take counties until they did not take cases in those counties until they started to have staffing enough to do it. And then they did it in a gradual way rather than all at once. So they did not take 100% of cases from the beginning. They proportioned the cases that they were taking based on the staffing that they got, and they were in place. And they also did not pull staff away from the counties that are already in the program in Concho Valley in order to cover that startup. And I think that's part of the discussion that we would need to have with Valverde County in order to make sure that the services to these 5 counties did not suffer in any way because of an addition.
And if I can add, and certainly Judge Dominguez, I would be more than happy to set up some time to visit with you or any of the other board members who would be interested in having this discussion. But at least as to my perspective, as to why we kind of went off the rails with the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid Public Defender Office program. It had a lot to do with the administration of the program out of their Waco office, which is where I believe they're still headquartered today. But there was a disconnect between what Valverde County was being billed for. For example, when Mr. McDermott and Mr. Garza left the Valverde County jurisdiction, if you will, the quality of lawyers that were assigned here was really lacking, in that we had baby lawyers coming in handling felony cases that really weren't qualified to do it, but that's who they manned their office with. We started getting invoices, for example, for travel expenses to Webb County because they were going to a training or something in Webb County. We started getting invoices for overhead costs that were not factored into our contract with Texas Rio Grande Aid. I'll give you an example. They found rat droppings, and so they hired a company to come and fumigate, and they pawned those expenses on to the Valverde County contract, and it wasn't part of our agreement. There were a lot of administrative decisions and discrepancies that were just really difficult for the county judge at the time and the commissioner's court to swallow and reconcile with the contract that we had. So it was kind of twofold. It was how the administration was kind of handling the agreement with Valverde County, but even more importantly, it got to the point where our district judges were not even appointing cases to the public defender office because they didn't feel like the attorneys that were representing that program were qualified to do the work. So we were paying a contract for the public defender office and then having to appoint private counsel to handle a good number of those cases. And it just didn't make sense anymore. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Mr. Martinez, are you any relation to Joe Frank Martinez, the sheriff?
I don't know how to answer that, sir, because he's my older brother. I don't know if that's good or bad.
No, he and I work together. I think very highly of him. I was about to say, do you have to have the last name Martinez to be elected in Valverde County? So,
You
but
don't
tell
have
him
to, Judge Portillo, but
Yeah.
it seems like lately it helps.
tell him I said hello.
I sure will, Judge. Thank you.
Let me echo what Judge Dominguez said. Those are my concerns, or some of them are my concerns. Valverde what's the population of Valverde County?
We're just under 50,000. We're about 48, 49,000, Judge.
And I was going to say, if you added up the entire population of all the other counties, we're going to be under 50,000. So my big thing, and just like Judge Dominguez stated, I think we didn't have, unfortunately, with the number of cases, and there have been some changes, and we'll see how those are going to play out. But I guess it was probably about a 5 or 6 month period that we were having to go outside. And I don't know how many cases I had to assign, go reach out from under their umbrella to go out into the private sector to find somebody. But I'm going to make an assumption, it's probably about 10 or 12 times. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot. Especially Presidio County doesn't have a lot of cases, but it was it was a financial blow to us, or something we didn't expect. So here we are. We're still in the early stages of trying to build ours up, and we're still waiting to see what that's going to look like. So again, my big concern would be on taking you guys on. We would more than double in size, and would we be ready? So.
No, I understand that, Judge, and those are obviously very, very good concerns.
Yeah, we agree. When this, Judge Portillo, when this was first raised a few years back, it was presented to me, and as Mr. McDermott will recall, I somewhat vetoed it at the time because I felt like we just weren't ready. They weren't ready as a department for that kind of expansion. Now, in retrospect, looking back, I'm glad that we waited. I think in the 4 years they've learned a lot. They've gotten a lot more stable. aside from these staffing problems, I completely agree. I'm not going to vote in favor of any program that's going to degrade the quality of service that's provided to the 5 counties that we created this department to serve. So I agree with you absolutely 100% on that. That was my resistance then, and they're still going to have to convince me now.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is incumbent upon all of us to help as many people as we can. So I'm open to the conversation now, whereas I shut it down the first time y'all brought it to me back before the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to the information you give us, James. I know you're going to do your due diligence before you make any proposals. And if you don't think you can do it, I know you'll tell us that, and we won't spend the time. So, well, thank you, Mr. Martinez. Let's go ahead and keep moving along. Next up is the chief's report. So, Mr. McDermott, present your report at this time.
Thank you. I didn't write a written report this time because sort of the range of things that have been going on and things that we need to talk about today. And I just wanted, before I started, I think to pause because of the difficulties of the year and difficulties of the things that we've got coming up, to just express some thanks. This has been a tough year, but there's been something from each of the county judges that has been really valuable in helping to keep us move forward. Judge Arias, for the entire 6 years, you've been supportive of this program. You've been, as our fiscal agent, you've gotten so many contracts and decisions that have to go through your commissioner's court, and you've been with me and been available. And I just very much appreciate you.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Judge McKenzie, you texted me on election night to tell me that you had won. And you have kept open communication with me ever since. There have been some rough patches with transition, with the new prosecutors in your county and misdemeanor court, but you've been honest and thoughtful as we've gotten to know each other. And I was very thankful that you got the budget this year through Commissioner's Court without me having to come up there. The scheduling was very difficult, but you've been steadfast, and I really, really want to thank you for that. Judge Evans, you have been a commissioner for a long time before you became county judge, and you know everything about the history and what's gone on here. You've given me good and thoughtful advice. You've always taken my calls and been responsive, and that just makes my job so much easier. And Judge Portillo, you and I don't know each other very well yet. Still, you've been taking on a job that has pulled you in more directions, I think, than you even thought you could be pulled. You promised me when we met for the first time up in the courtroom at the beginning of the year that you believed in good government, and you have delivered. You run your court smoothly and efficiently. You've treated everybody with respect. I know the financial struggles that Presidio County has, and that they're real and that they're significant. But your efforts to make sure that the Public Defender's Office and the criminal justice system can keep going has not only been important to me in the way that I've built my career, but as I go around the state and talk to other people about, I bring up Presidio County, and you've gotten more fans than you know. And Judge Hennington, we have had some struggles this year. You're the judge in my home county, and we have office space here, and that has been one of the topics that we've got today. But I have been at your dockets. I've seen you thoughtfully respecting the right to counsel. I've seen you struggling to make sure that with our limited resources, the procedures are done as correctly as they can be. And you sat with me. I remember during a recent trial here in Brewster County, you sat with me in the courtroom and asked me questions to make sure you understood what was going on, that you could forget how they would apply if you have a trial in your courtroom. That really meant a lot to me as we have gone through this year, to know that fundamentally that you have been engaged in that. Last month, even, I was sitting in your office and you asked me to maybe go into private practice and take a private contract to handle the Brewster County cases. That offer was flattering, to know that you value the work that I do enough and the quality that I do, that I could be dedicated only to Brewster County, that would be a value to you, was important to me. And as we have struggled through this year, to know that there's that has meant a lot to me. Of course, I had said no. I was hired to be chief public defender for these 5 counties, and as we talked about with Valverde County, my commitment is to the 5 counties and to this region, and to build a public defender and to make it sustainable and to work on systems. But that has been the focus of my career. That is why I've been talking about Valverde County, and that's why I want to continue those conversations. Because I believe, in fact, that we can make it so that it helps these 5 counties, and not only is not a neutral addition, but can help. There are other things that we need to figure out in the process. The next step is our office space. And that is the agenda item that we're coming to next, I think. And the plan that it has to be that I am hiring enough that we can provide the services and continue to provide the services. I've got a few things here to say about the budget. I know that this budget this year and getting this param to where it needs to be is a struggle. And I also know, and I've talked with TIDC multiple times, that the 67% model is generous and responsive to the history they had in funding rural public defenders in the past, but it's not enough for our counties. Our counties are poor. Our counties have no mineral rights. Our counties do not have a tax base. There's no wiggle room. This is what is true. These 5 counties cannot afford a public defender, and they can't afford not to have a public defender. And we need to have an honest conversation with TIDC about what that means and how we can have a path forward, a sustainable long-term path forward. If we're going to talk about office space and we're going to talk about leases, nobody wants to hire or to lease with the county or a government agency for a short term. And so we have to be looking long-term at what this means, and TIDC support is critical for that. I've been talking about what data we need in order to look at that more effectively, whether that is tax base, how we measure revenue versus other counties. I don't know, but I know that TIDC has been responsive and thoughtful, and I don't know what the outcome is, but we're trying. I'm just going to go to the staffing real quick. We have hired a 30-year lawyer who started on October 2nd. He has made some appearances in court already. I think Judge Dominguez has bond hearings with him in about 20 minutes. But we're very excited. He comes with a lot of experience. He needs to learn some things. For example, how to not have paper files. And that is, I don't want to be ageist, but that is real for some people. And we're getting there. We're getting there. I will admit that I was not on board either, but Paul has maybe is not only persuasive, but can just decide things are happening and make people do them. We lost Taylor, as you know. She passed the bar exam and immediately gave notice and left and moved to Nueces County. I will go back and mention one thing about Phil, our new felony lawyer. In his first meeting with the prosecutor from El Paso to negotiate cases, the prosecutor spent 15 minutes with him, sending him the attorney pay scale from El Paso County and trying to convince him to leave here and move to El Paso. That to me, it is meaningful about how we have to go about looking at the cost of these counties, because that was a meaningful interaction. That was the first conversation. We have hired a law student at Tulane who's going to come in the spring after graduation. She also called me this morning to ask if she could work part-time remotely through the spring semester, and I'm trying to explore that with her and see what we can do to help that. And we're really excited about that. Paul and I have been going to law schools this fall to do on-campus interviewing and try and recruit there too. I want to mention one person before we move on to the rest of the agenda. And that is our investigator, Connie Santillan, who I've now made basically chief of staff. If any judge here has seen us come to court and thought we were prepared, it was because Connie has taken on the load share of what the work we do and making sure that we are ready, to make sure that we know what is in the discovery, to make sure that we have talked to clients, that we know what their stories are. As much as Paul and I have been able to do and how the different directions we've been pulled, there is nothing that we could have done without Connie. If you think that we have gotten anything done, if you've seen any results in your court, it's because of Connie. And everybody here has been important. Everybody has been important, and everybody has been a cost savings, because the work that they do has meant that I could propose a budget with fewer lawyers than the caseload guidelines from the APA suggest. But I just really wanted to point her out. I've not given her the credit in previous meetings that she deserves. And I will pass it over to you, Judge Ferguson.
All right, thank you for the report and the update. I think our next item is also sort of a report and update from you. It is a discussion of the Brewster County budgeting issues that led us to setting this sort of special meeting today. So go ahead, Mr. McDermott.
To clarify, this meeting was scheduled 2 months ago. The special meeting was canceled at the end of September. I did go to Commissioner's Court with Judge Hennington at the end of September. Those corrections were made, and we canceled that board meeting because that happened. I got the interlocal agreement signed from Judge Hennington within hours after, and sent that to Judge Arias. So I believe that issue is resolved.
All right. Next up, discussion and possible action regarding primary office space. Mr. McDermott.
I'll start that conversation and then hand it over to Judge Hennington. It is 100% true that we have outgrown Brewster County. We cannot fit in the space here. We have not fit here for quite some time. I do not believe that the county has additional space that even could be configured for what we need. Even if it existed, we need to talk about, it doesn't exist, but separately because of that, we would need to talk about what money is available for rent, for moving, for build out, because as I've pointed out, I think in every budget cycle we've gone through, there's been a zero line item in my budget for that amount. I have, without having any authority yet to do anything, just sort of scouted out to see what's available. Again, there's nothing I think in Brewster County that the county owns that's available. There is some space off of Highway 90 going towards Marfa. That is an empty building that I believe used to house the federal public defenders. That was on the market for sale for about $350,000. Judge Hennington may know more about its status now than I do. And so when I pass it over to him, I'm sure he can talk about that. That, for those of you who are aware of Brewster County, I believe was owned by, or is owned by, a retired dentist from the area, whose name escapes me right now, of course. We also have a bid in, an informal bid from property across the street here from the courthouse, not on county property. And that is either the hair salon and some buildings around it that are across the street, or buildings next to it that have been used as Airbnb and some office space. They could easily be configured into an office with some work, but it does not appear from my walkthrough as being major work. The proposal that those are owned by, or would be owned by, a person named Jenny Hatch, who has been local here in Alpine for quite some time. She has proposed either for the whole space we're estimating with our staffing that we would need between 4,000 and 5,000 square feet. She is proposing with no bills paid, 6,000 a month, or with all bills paid, $7,400 a month. And that would be, the no bills paid would be not paying, that we would pay utilities, property taxes, building maintenance, and insurance. If she paid all of that, her proposal would be, so it would be no cost to us except to pay rent, would be $7,400 a month. There was a building across the street from the courthouse going east that Judge Hennington asked me to go look at. I think he was also considering for juvenile probation. I went in there and I could tell immediately that not only was the layout not going to work, no layout in there could work, but the mold was so significant that I couldn't imagine that it was going to be cost effective for any purpose. And that, and then I've had some discussions with Judge Evans, and Judge Evans can also talk to this about whether or not there might be space available either in the short run or in the long run in Jeff Davis County up in Fort Davis. So I'll hand it over to Judge Hennington.
All right, Judge Hennington, go ahead if you have something to add.
I think he's got it covered. I mean, I think that's the issue that we put it on the agenda simply because we wanted to keep it in front of this group and in front of us and not just let it kind of drift into next year, by Mr. McDermott's own admission, and they are crammed in that space. So clearly we need to come up with a solution. I think the solution at the old public defender's office for the federal public defender might be a good one. That one is available. You're sort of competing with the central appraisal district because they're moving out of the post office as well, and they're looking for space. But first come, first serve. That rents for my understanding $2,500 a month, and it probably needs a little bit of, in my opinion, a little bit of leasehold improvements. Pull out the old ratty carpet and put in some decent flooring, and then a few cosmetic paint jobs and some sealing around the doors. But I think otherwise it's in pretty good shape. That is a struggle, finding the right amount of space for your growing staff. So, I think that's kind of why we put it on the agenda, is we just want to keep it in front of this group and in front of Mr. McDermott to continue to pursue some avenues. I don't know that I can't speak for the Commissioner's Court. We haven't discussed this, but there could be a pathway where we might buy a building if we knew we had a lease, a committed lease stream to cover the cost of that building.
So I forgot to mention that Judge Hennington may have gotten ahead of himself a little bit. There was a vote at Brewster County Commissioner's Court last week. Is that right, Judge Hennington?
Uh-huh.
And what was the motion?
Well,
on that?
the vote was to on January 1st, the court will start charging rent. The amount has not been set yet.
So I think I listened to the recording. If I remember correctly, the vote was to start charging us rent on January 1st or ask us to leave. So I don't know what flexibility or what Brewster County means by that as a deadline. I just know for the board here, there is no current rent included as a line item in our budget. And so we've got a short-term problem and long-term problem. One is what to do come January 1st when Brewster County wants us out or wants to start to pay rent. And then two, what is the long-term solution?
All right, thank you. I think you mentioned Judge Evans. Judge Evans, was there anything you wanted to add or any possibilities you wanted to float that you've been considering?
The county doesn't have anything at the moment. We were looking into maybe building some office space over here, but that's going to be a long-term, a ways away and not not doable in the near future. The old grocery store is up for sale. I don't know what they're asking for it. But that is plenty of adequate space for whatever you need. Other than that, there's really not much in Fort Davis and in ways of 4,000 to 5,000 square feet office building.
So
No, you're absolutely right there. Go ahead, Mr. McDermott.
what I think I need is I don't think I need a path forward.
Right.
And I need some idea of some authority that I have to do anything. One is I don't have a budget for rent or purchase and I need some direction as to what timeline and what I need to do in order to get that. Of course, Judge Hennington and I talked last week that he knows that if we were renting outside of the county building, that would increase costs to all the counties, including to Brewster County, because that rent would need to be included in our budget. And that also involves TIDC and the TIDC board and what they're willing to fund and what they're not willing to fund. So one is funding in part, and that would be what is the timeline and how am I going about getting the dollars. Two is from TIDC, working with them to figure out what they think that their board might be willing to do. And then three is what to do when we get to the point of moving, because when I was 25, I probably would have stepped up and said, we can figure this out. But I think those days, as much as I try and exercise and keep in shape, those days are behind me of being able to sort of step up and say, we're going to do this ourselves. And so some sort of discussion at some point in a timely manner of what those dollars might be and how to provide for those as well. So those are the three things I think that I need.
What do you?
There-
oh,
Pardon
Go
me,
ahead.
there is some suggestions. Judge Portillo and I are on the same page about seeing what Saul Ross has.
I see that. I can go make an appointment with the president, Judge Evans and Judge Portillo, and see what they've got. The thing that I'm most aware of is the condemned building, so I'm not moving in there. But I know they've got enrollment that is down, and we might be able to talk to them. We have problems, and that is because of our clientele. We do sometimes need to meet with our folks in person. They might have bond restrictions on being able to go near a school or university. Some of those restrictions might be mandatory, especially for those who are accused of a sex offense. And so one of the tricks in finding office space, I know that Judge Hennington and I in the past have talked about a city building that was on the other side of town that was right next door to a park. And that just meant, we would have to restrict our communication, our meetings with clients, and that is just not viable. So in small communities, there is that additional problem.
Right. And I think that the county judges need to be, now that we see we're on such a short term here with Brewster County, y'all need to be prepared for the fact that if even at $2,500 a month rent, that's about $30,000 a year. Your county's prorated percentage, but Brewster County would be looking at what, 10,000 additional dollars with 3 months off. So you'd be looking about maybe $7,500 to $8,000 that they would have to add in Brewster County's budget, and each of you would have some amount we would have to cover to cover that new line item on such short notice. So y'all need to be aware of the impact that might have. That decision might have on your budgets. Maybe talk to your treasurers, your auditors, let them know. So James, what is it you're looking for from us? What kind of authority or motion are you looking for at this point?
Well, at the very least, I don't know if it can come from this board, if it's just that we need to make the suggestion and for Judge Arias to bring it to Commissioner's Court in Culberson County. Is I don't believe I've got authority to have any real negotiations to talk about to talk to real estate agents or to talk about places. So at least knowing that I've got authority to do that. And the second is that I think that I just need to have a separate conversation with Mr. Ehlers and Mr. Colfax to discuss what TIDC, what it might look like from TIDC's direction. I think the third thing is that I plan by the end of November to have a full accounting for the board as to the financial results of the last fiscal year. I've done a preliminary part of that with Culberson County last week or 2 weeks ago, and there may be, based on us not being able to staff up quickly with the new budget, there may be some money available in this budget that I can come and ask for approval to move, but that also requires TIDC approval from this board and from the counties. And so I thought I would bring that to the next meeting when I can have numbers actually in front of me.
James, hello, everyone. Edwin Colfax from TIDC Grants. My suggestion would be that even if you don't know what's next, you do know that you are going to have expenses for office space. I would try to construct some kind of estimate of what you think that may be. And my suggestion would be to go ahead and, between now and December, when our board meets next, to go ahead and prepare a grant modification request that would include your best estimate of rental costs to have some way for us to be kind of in place if they agree to increase the grant to add that, so to get the ball rolling on at least some portion or of that being picked up by the grant. So even if you don't know what it's going to cost now, you can come up with some figure that's kind of provisional. I think, we'd be happy to work with you to prepare that to take to our board, given your scenario.
Thank you, Mr. Colfax.
James, how many line item attorneys do you have budgeted for this year? 3?
So we've got, in addition to Paul and myself, we've got 4. We've got Phil, who just started. One of those grants was the open grants right now is with the ARPA funds. And so I'm not sure that can be switched around for any other purpose. And then we have the 2 other positions. And so, right, I think there may be money that when I come back at the next board meeting and say, I can anticipate that this money is not going to be spent until May, and that might be available, that might be something that we can look at for short-term solutions. But I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. I hope to have them in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, because I'm thinking it might be worth doing a line item adjustment to get you into a place that's actually suitable for your office, and then you're going to be right back into your grant cycle. What, first quarter of next year?
We need I think that the timing of this is obviously the ideal timing would be that I wouldn't have to worry about paying anything until next October. But in the meantime, what we do is we'll start working up next year's budget starting in March and including a line item for that in the budget that we would propose in April or May to the board.
I think the Commissioners Court I think the point of this was to get something moving. I don't know that if the Commissioners Court knew that there was a strategy, I don't know that the Commissioners Court would necessarily hold to that January 1st deadline hard and fast. I think the issue for us is it's government. So, we're sitting here this time next year and we haven't resolved the issue. So you need to resolve it for practical matters, and we do too for financial matters. So I think I would say, if we're talking about waiting till what, December for you to get the numbers?
No, so I would have to have them sooner because the TIDC board meeting is at the beginning of December. And so I would need to have something to them probably by Thanksgiving, Mr. Colfax. Latest by Thanksgiving, I would need to have a grant modification proposal to them so it could be included And I think he usually tries to make sure that the decision makers there know things in advance of their board meeting. And so that would give him enough time, which would mean that we would need to know something here in the next couple of weeks so that I could package that up and have it to him by Thanksgiving. So I would need to have a meeting beginning early to middle November. So I would have enough time to get that over to Edwin. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's the timeline we would need in order for our board to take up a additional funding request in December. I think by Thanksgiving at the latest.
So, Mr. Colfax, if we shifted money out of an existing line item to cover the rent until they could come in with the next year's full grant, could that be done?
But generally speaking, yes. Mr. McDermott noted that part of the funding that's currently in place is a federal grant using ARPA funds. That was sort of earmarked for backlog reduction. We're under a little bit more rigid requirements for how that might be repurposed. So that may be tricky, but if certainly within the core grant, if you will, reallocating from other budget line items within that is a possibility that's relatively straightforward, especially if it's kind of in the short, like part of a short-term solution. So we can take a look at, or I'm happy to work with Mr. McDermott to look at how much might be able to be identified there, but that is a possibility.
Okay.
Of course, we don't have an agreement with Brewster County for that. We don't have an interlocal for that. We don't have the budget for that right now. So these are all things we need to talk about. I think that we need to have some relatively prompt discussions with Val Verde County to find out if that's a realistic concept or not, because that too could shift some money around to benefit the 5 counties here. I was not aware of the Brewster County action until well after it happened. I wasn't notified it was going on the agenda or even that it was up for discussion. So I'm doing the same thing y'all are doing, which is trying to glean information as we go. But essentially, if we're being forced into a position that we need to be in, which is Brewster County space isn't right anymore for the size of the department and the service it's providing, then I think it's time that we make that a priority and take a quick look at where we want to go with the department. Does it stay in Brewster? Judge Radias may remember back at the very beginning, he made a hard sell on me, trying to get me to agree that the department could be in Culberson County back early on. And he's a good salesman. If you haven't been under the gun from Judge Radias, he's very persuasive. But Judge Cano was really insistent that the center be in Alpine, and so we did that. But I think I'm not sure we need a motion for this, Mr. McDermott. I think that you have the right to pursue as chief options, not negotiating contracts, but pursuing options and getting them to us so we can make some pretty quick decisions on the direction and the future of the office. I want to open up to everybody. Anybody else have anything they want to add about what they're thinking and options available?
I agree with you, Judge Ferguson. I don't think he mentioned something about putting it on the agenda on our commissioner's court. Mr. McDermott, is that what you mentioned? Giving you permission?
I didn't. Judge Ferguson says that he doesn't think that I need it at this point.
Yeah, I don't either. I think you're good to go. Now, entering into our contract is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be us.
Right. I think it has to go through this oversight board and get approval, and then go to the commissioner's court and get on their agenda to get approval. So I think there are multiple steps. I'm not even sure it would be possible to do before the end of the year with the information gathering we need to do, but we'll have to just see how it plays out. So thank you for that. Judge Portillo?
No, I was just going to mention some of the suggestions that Ms. Moore had. I mean, we do have people in our county jails that I'm sure would jump at the chance if we put them to work and work off some of their lunch and help you move when you do find a place that you think is appropriate. The county has trailers. The county has we have a workforce that we have access to. Because yeah, you're right. We probably shouldn't be lifting stuff like that. But I do think Sol Ross has their attendance and their student ratio has really dropped. I know they have a lot of space available. It may be something in the criminal justice department that could suit you at least temporarily. I'm sure the president of the university would be willing to have those conversations with you. So I think, and I agree with Judge Urias and Judge Ferguson. I think just come back with as many possible scenarios and solutions as you see fit, and let us know what you find. Commercial space is tough everywhere.
Mm-hmm. One thing I think that they could consider is multiple locations. So they could have a couple of people in one county and then a couple of people in another county. And I mean, James knows he's going to have to get creative because eventually you outgrow every space in the 394th. It's not hard to outgrow the biggest space in our 5 counties. So I think that's another creative idea that they can look into, is having multiple locations through the technology that we're implementing now. And I know that TIDC loves funding grants for new technology and advancement. So I'm sure that they're sitting there thinking we could connect multiple offices together in a web that would be seamless and a model for the rest of the state. And I can just hear them now saying we would fund 100% of that idea if you just present it in a way. I'm just kidding, but they really do support our technological advancements, and we're really grateful to the two of you and to everybody at TIDC for how supportive you've been of Far West Texas and these 5 counties. I think I can speak for all the judges here in saying thank you and how grateful we are that you've made all of this possible for all of us and all of the people who rely on us. So there's Judge Dominguez is back with the thumbs up. Thank you, Judge. All right. So does anyone want to make a motion? This is an action item. Are there any motions that anyone wants to make? Right. Hearing none, we will move on to public comment. Has anyone signed up, or is anyone logged on for public comment purposes? Or is there anyone here who wants to make a comment at this time?
There's nobody in the waiting room.
Judge Ferguson, just two things real quick. When we have these oversight meetings, I think it'd be very helpful for this group, at least it would be for me, if we had, because I do have a set of financials, just a set of financials for the group, for the operation year to date, and then maybe some sort of a summary of by county cases taken in, and cases, what cases were handled or how they were handled, and sort of a beginning and ending inventory of caseloads by county. I think that would be very helpful to us in decision making. I mean, I'm looking at a budget that was provided to me by Culberson County for 24, and it looks like the grant from the state is 1.1, call it 1.2 million, and the contributions from the counties is 372,647, which is fine. But there are, to me, there are several salaries in here. Yeah, I'm not, I realize that it's the catch-22 because Mr. McDermott needs to hire these people, but it looks like there's room within the county contributions alone to make a decision to find him a place that's adequate for his lease needs. And I suspect that still probably has to go through TIDC, but our contributions alone would cover well cover a rent, particularly a $2,500 a month rent. So I think it'd be helpful to have these numbers when we're having this meeting.
Thank you for that comment, Judge. Anyone else with a comment on the public comment section? All right. Mr. McDermott, you have a lot of homework to do. When do you think you're going to need to bring us back together to share some ideas and make some proposals?
Well, I'm glad that we have a new lawyer here because I have had no time. And I think that if we are, let me pull up a calendar real quick. Today is October 16th. If I need to have a proposal to TIDC by November 22nd, then I feel like that means that, well, election day is, which is just only constitutional amendments, I think, is November 7th, but somewhere in that week is probably my ideal. It may not be possible, but it's my ideal. I can always ask for what I would love. I never get it.
The following week, lunchtime, like we've been doing, I can do on a couple of the days. That week is pretty much impossible for me, the week of the 6th. I'm booked all day, every day, including lunch. But I could do lunchtime the 14th, 15th, or 16th.
I'm happy to work with any of those, Judge, for whatever the board wishes to set.
Why don't you do a doodle poll and send it to the members of the board so we can sign up for what times we have available and see if we've got a quorum that can meet.
Yes. For the 14th, 15th, or 16th at noon.
That I can do. Other than that, I have to do 5 o'clock Central Time for Judge McKenzie there.
That's right. Judge McKenzie and Judge Dominguez were talking about 11 a.m. Mountain Time. I will send a poll out this afternoon and see what we can do.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I know this was a pretty long meeting, but it was an important one for the future of the office. So some exciting possibilities with Valverde, as well as other ideas. So thank you all for being here. We're going to take some action probably next time we get together. So everybody do what you can to make the meeting and help us by giving us your wisdom and guidance as we go forward. All right. That being said, we've reached the bottom of the agenda and we are therefore adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.